Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our latest webinar, sponsored by Ascente. Today's event will see us discussing the workplace of the future, with our panel of experts primed to provide in-depth discussion of the considerations emerging as facilities around the UK prepare for the easing of lockdown restrictions. There are many developments to consider as facilities begin to reopen, some of which have been closed for the past year, while others have remained open, but with attendance numbers of a fraction of those last seen in February 2020. FM has been at the centre of all adaptations to facilities over the last year, and this is likely to be the case for some time to come. The PFM Editorial Advisory Board have been an excellent sounding board over the past year, emphasising how FMs have seen their transformation of the workplace gain the attention and appreciation of the boardroom, and raising FM to unprecedented heights of recognition. While this has been one of the more positive developments emerging from the pandemic, there are many other aspects to prepare for and consider, particularly with the continuing easing of lockdown restrictions increasingly seen around the UK. We'll be hearing from our three experts on an individual basis over the next few minutes, but we'll be opening the discussion up to answer questions from attendees later in the debate. Please click on the Q&A button on your screen to post these, and we'll try to answer as many as possible before the close of today's event at 3:30. We're extremely fortunate to be able to hear the thoughts of three highly experienced people in today's panel of experts, which includes John Knight, Managing Director of our sponsor, Ascente. Many thanks to John for his support for today's event. We'll be hearing from him very shortly. Also on our panel are representatives of the award-winning partnership between the Rugby Football Union and CBRE GWS, which was recently confirmed as the winner of the PFM Partnership Awards Partners in Energy Management category. We have the RFU Head of Venue Facilities, David Hewins, and CBRE GWS Business Unit Director, Edward Buttery, with us today. Many thanks to our three panelists for their support. Let's begin with Ascente Managing Director, John Knight. John, would you like to explain the reasons for your presence here today and thoughts on how things will develop over the next few months?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Dennis, and thank you very much for hosting this. I think the question was, why would we sponsor something like this? So for those who don't know us, because you may not know us already, we are a technology distribution business. So we spent most of our time talking to IT and AV people. And before COVID occurred, and before any of us had heard of terms like social distancing, we were already trying to pick up on some of what we saw as upcoming trends in the world of facilities, such as agile working and activity-based working. And so we were already aware of some of these things. But what seems to have happened throughout COVID is that the world of facilities and technology is on a collision course. And some of these topics that we'd like to discuss today around how businesses can plan for the future of the workplace, how they can plan for a safe return of their employees to the workplace, and what challenges things like hybrid working is going to create. Are some of the topics that we're finding are front and center of the conversations that we're having every day. So some of our technologies are things like a smart workplace technology platforms where you can have desk booking, room booking, visitor management, and data that's being collected from those platforms around occupancy levels. We also have technology that can support whole room video conferencing and microphone technologies that can enable medium to large size spaces to benefit from everybody in that room, regardless of where they're sat or how far apart they're sitting, to be heard correctly on the video call. As I say, February of last year, we spent most of our time talking to the technology folks about these things. And because of COVID, we're now finding that actually it's a mixture of people where facilities seem to be taking a very proactive and forward-thinking role in some of these decisions, because the impacts on the businesses have the potential to be quite broad, whether it's reduction of real estate, redesign of real estate, or trying to create an office environment that's going to encourage and support employees coming back into the workplace. These are all topics where technology has a part to play. So I'm delighted to be here today, and hope I can contribute to the conversation.
Thank you very much, John. It's much appreciated, and well, I'm sure we'll be exploring all those topics in more depth in the minutes to come. So, following that, I'd just like to invite David to provide his thoughts on how things will develop over the next few weeks and months. David.
Thank you very much, Dennis. So, sorry, I have to apologise for the start. I was expecting the sweeper on the pitch to be finished by now, and he's got 1 or 2 more lines to go. So, if you can hear some noise in the background, that's what's happening. Yes, thank you very much. So, obviously, looking after a stadium, we've got the pleasure of it being a multi-use site. So, not only do we have the stadium itself and all the sporting activities associated with that, we've also got a hotel, we've got a Virgin Gymnasium, and we've got office space within the building as well. So we're trying to deal with a multitude of different factors coming back into the workplace. Reopening a hotel when the sort of the volumes are there, bringing the office space back into use, and also being prepared for sporting events as well. So, and all of those have different guidelines, have different pressures around them. And equally have different personnel issues to them in how people have been working over the last 12 months. So I'm quite looking forward to being able to discuss, probably from my side, more of the behavioural piece, the person element of this. So I know John's looking at the technology, and they all interface into each other, but it's how the person comes back into the environment and what that's going to mean for us and how we respond to that as facilities managers. Because I think with anything, people change, requirements change over time. So it's going to be an interesting journey. So that's very much going to be an area for us to look at today.
Thanks, David. That's great. So yes, it's we can see the topics starting to develop now from this discussion. So having heard from John and David, let's invite Ed now to add his thoughts to the debate. Ed.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks very much, Dennis. And first of all, I had been hoping this afternoon to be stood next to David at Twickenham. I definitely think he's got the best backdrop of the three of us, but as Dennis and the team know, I'm about 4 days off the due date of my firstborn with my wife, so I'm very much locked in the spare room at the moment on a very short notice to move. But at CBRE, I mean, we've been playing a few different roles over the last year or so, and we'll probably continue to do so. The first being probably the most obvious ones in terms of just keeping buildings that are existing in a varying states of either full use or hibernation ticking over as best we can. Also with clients like David in the RFU, looking at the savings that can be made at the same time. All of a sudden, we've had a really interesting opportunity to not only save energy, but look at a baseline building in a way that would never normally be possible. What does your building look like in a year of near complete absence? And that's, I think, informed an awful lot of other decisions that will be really useful as we come back into normality. And the last one, I think, beyond our normal facility services, we've been acting as a bit of an advisor and a sounding board. I mean, every client, whether it's in a stadium, whether it's I'm lucky to represent or work for some of the buildings I've got over my shoulder, is trying to work out what the important next step will be. And so far over the last 12 months, probably all of us would have to hold our hands up and say our crystal balls have failed us, and that a few times we've thought we've known what was happening over from the autumn into the winter or something, and it just hasn't played out. But at companies like CBRE, we can at least help clients go, okay, well, this is what we're seeing other stadia do or other city office buildings do, well beyond just their immediate counterparts, but also we're trying to take lessons from For instance, anecdotally, we're starting to hear from the Far East, Hong Kong, cities that possibly have returned a little more to what we would consider normal than we have been able to so far. And some really interesting anecdotal trends coming out of there that at the moment we might all like to think or say that actually, rather than the full working from home we're experiencing, many of us are experiencing at the moment, or the full back to the office of 2019 and before, most of us are probably wishing for a bit of a dream scenario of 2 or 3 days each per week, and that would be the absolute sweet spot. As it actually sounds at the moment, most at least corporate office blocks are seeing a bit of a sort of a U-shaped graph in terms of what actually happens, that your back office staff, your finance, your IT, whatever that might be for your organization, are almost entirely at home, coming into the office only for key meetings, while your front office or your leadership or those that have regular FaceTime are much more back into the office than they might think already. And whether that persists or whether that's an overcorrection from a lack of FaceTime, we don't know yet. My personal view is we will probably be returning more to normal than we all currently expect, that normality will creep back up on us, mostly because FaceTime, be it with clients or your own team or anything, breeds more FaceTime. You book in the next meeting, you book in the next catch up with an individual, or even the next pint or something like that. And all of a sudden, I think you'll see that snowball quite quickly into relative normality in terms of the amount of time we're spending on sites or our own offices or anything like that. But really at CBRE, we just try to provide what comfort and advice we can in that regard, in that, okay, at the very least, a particular client might not be too sure how to play out the next few weeks. Nobody is at the moment. We're working it out, and trying to stay agile is probably the best course of action at the moment.
Thank you, Ed. I think that's I think your final comment is particularly pertinent to our discussion today, because I think the agile approach is certainly one to be encouraged. How everybody delivers that remains to be seen. But fortunately, we've got the three of you here today to help us with all the aspects that you're considering at the minute. So, and at that point, I was going to go back to ask David to actually share some of the discussions that are ongoing with everyone at Headingley to gradually reopen the various areas.
Thank you. So I'm actually going to pick up quickly something on what Ed said there about the FaceTime piece. Because I actually think there's an opposite scenario, certainly with the type of group that we have at the RFU. It's very young as a whole. They're naturally dispersed anyway, because we're supporting community rugby across the UK as well. And if anything, the people who are at the stadium on a day-to-day basis, which is very, I mean, there's 20 people in the office today, out of an office that was 300. The people who are in the office are actually the ones who are now missing out, because everyone else is working remotely and they're all on the calls together. And if you're not part of that call, there's no sort of lateral conversation going on, and you're actually missing that because you're having to look after an empty building and still run around. So I think that there's disparity in both directions, that remote working culture that's developed and the teams that are formed through that, and then equally the teams that are on sites. So we acted quite quickly when the pandemic struck, and we rapidly went into a hibernation scenario with the stadium, because it's so big and it costs so much money to run. We hibernated it very, very quickly, and we actually introduced desk booking systems right from the outset. I think we had ours in place late April of last year, just using a very simple Microsoft platform. More than anything, for the safety point of view of them being able to just clean what was necessary to clean, rather than having to try and do blanket disinfection of all areas, which is A, impossible to do, and B, highly costly to even attempt. So we introduced those bits quite early on. And thankfully, we'd already got the technology in place with Skype, and then obviously everybody moved towards Teams more as well as time went by. What we're finding now is, because we've got sort of a dispersed workforce and quite a young workforce, is they have all naturally become accustomed to working from home, having the flexibility to be able to do that bit of sport when they want to, etc., and actually deal with emails at whatever time they want to in the day. So there isn't actually a huge appetite for people to come back. So we've actually looked at it now in there's three phases to our return to work. The phase now, obviously, where we're still under guidance to not come into work if possible, and going through the easing process. Then when we get to a point where from 12th of April, I think they put it onwards to say, okay, come back to the office if you need to from a personal basis, but you still don't need to. And then come June, okay, we can start looking back about coming back into the office. But there's the desire to come back into the office space at the moment isn't there. However, a lot of the conversations that we're having is that behaviour will change, and I think Ed touched on it. There will be that drift, and behaviour will change over time, and people will slowly sort of develop that need to come back into the office. The meetings will happen. So what we're really worried about at the moment is sort of jumping in at the deep end, saying, okay, we're going to turn the office into a Google office and build all the slides and pool tables and all the rest of it, but actually spend a load of money on that when it's not really what we need. So what we're seeing is there's probably an interim at some point where the likes of John and his companies are going to help us with technology to be able to support that transition of office and home working until we get to that balance point where we actually know where we're going to be and how many people come into the office. So it would be very easy to run off and strip all the desks out, spend lots of money on Skype rooms, but that may not be what we need. So we're trying to, so that's the first bit, is we're trying to see what that interim phase is going to be and what that's going to look like, just to be sensible financially at how we approach this. And then the other one is that we are also looking to use it as a moment for change, behavioural change. And I mentioned that at the start, in that because people aren't used to being in the office now, when they come back in, it's our chance to change how that space works for them. So a very simple example is that we've dialed all of the PIRs on all of our lights down to the absolute minimum period of time. So those lights only stay on as they walk through that space now, and that's in the main office. And people have got used to that, because actually, if there's only 20 people in the office, why keep all of the lights on all of the time? And people very quickly get used to a different format, a different environment for them to operate in. So we're really looking to use it as a springboard to say, do we actually need to do what we always used to do? Just because that's what we've always done, let's take the opportunity to bring about change, bring about the way that we work, become more efficient, all those sort of elements, because the instant somebody walks into a building, it costs money. And trying to get people to understand that before was very difficult, because, well, the lights have always been on. Those facilities have always been available to me. Well, actually, no, because we only need you to use it because you really specifically need to use it. Don't take the shortcut if you can walk around the side instead, and that saves us £100 in the process. It's that sort of approach to get people to rethink how they operate within the work environment. So that's what we're driving on at the moment, but it's still very difficult, because actually getting anyone to be able to make a clear statement of this is what we want is actually really hard, because we're not all back. You can do as many surveys as you like, but until you can actually sort of really get the people back into the workspace and test it, it's actually difficult to make any solid decisions.
Absolutely, yes. I think the decision-making process is going to be one of the biggest challenges, isn't it, in the next few months and weeks. But John, I think from our previous discussions, I think you've got a few suggestions, haven't you, to how to enable people to adapt their offerings to deal with the changing conditions.
Yeah, well, I think the first point that I was just going to make, which I made when we first discussed this topic offline, was that actually it's interesting to hear that the RFU was so responsive to the pandemic by implementing desk booking so quickly. apart from organizations who had already, and I'm going to do this, gone agile before COVID hit, the majority have waited. I think there's a general kind of Britishness about this, where keep calm and do nothing is a strategy when times of crisis can occur, and that's not me trying to be critical of everybody. It's an observation of what's been going on, because we are living in very uncertain times. But it was interesting when we first talked about this that David said, well, we almost immediately implemented desk booking, because we obviously sell desk booking solutions, but as a result of the conversations that we've been having, we've now tried to shift the conversation from talking about desk booking and what type of system you want to, oh, okay, what you're actually saying is that you want to have an occupancy management strategy. Because if you can understand the occupancy of your building, that enables you to make other decisions. So David gave the example of implementing a cleaning regime where you only clean the desks that have been utilized, rather than cleaning all of the desks every day. So that's a quick and obvious example. Picking up on the point about lighting, we're working with organizations at the moment who want to link their building management systems to data from things like desk booking or room booking, so that rather than even running the lights at 20%, you just turn the lights off if desks are not booked within certain areas, or if meeting rooms are not in use, you turn them off. And then the system knows when a booking is in place, and therefore can turn the lighting on, turn the heating on. Whether you want it hotter or colder is obviously another topic of debate within most offices, but you can link all these systems together so that it becomes an ecosystem that can support some of these different agendas of environmental cost savings, but most importantly, if you have a system which enables you to track who is coming, when they are coming, which teams are coming, which rooms are popular, which desks are popular, I think some of that data, and it's not the only data point that we would encourage, but some of that data helps to answer some of the other points that David was quite rightly making about what's the human element to this. And this is where I sometimes fall into sweeping statements where I might say, if I'm in a marketing team, then I want to come into the office and use a large room so that I can put post-it notes up on the wall, and use some string to join all my ideas together, because I'm a visual and creative person. That's my sweeping marketing statement out of the way. But actually, the point is, different people work in different ways. They want different types of environments. They may thrive off the idea of coming in with their entire team. So we hear about companies that want to encourage, the whole of marketing to come in on a Wednesday, the whole of finance to come in on a Thursday, as an example. But again, unless you can actually try and put a system in place where you can track that, unless you're a very small organization, asking Maureen on reception to look after all of that and track all of that data is a nigh on impossible task, especially as we move throughout 2021 and beyond. And just the final thing I would say is that, as well as helping this data to understand the behavioral elements to it and the environmental elements, there are some big questions that organizations are asking themselves and us, which is, we don't know how much office space we're going to need in 18 months' time. And I think Ed is absolutely right that there are going to be some businesses that are going to see a big kickback with people wanting to return. But then David quite rightly also pointed out that there are others, including his own, where maybe the desire to come back is lesser. And the only real way of the people who ultimately run organizations making decisions that they can use to kind of quantify whatever the outcome of this is in 18 months' time, for example, is by having data. And that's what a things like a desk booking or a smart office technology solution should represent. It should be implemented, in our opinion, for the right reasons. So we've kind of gone beyond that knee jerk of, I need desk booking because I need to clean desks, to I need desk booking to actually try and track what's happening in my workplace and look at some of these behavioural and future office decisions that I need to make.
Yes, absolutely. The data-driven model seems to be sort of highly logical. But sorry, David.
I was just going to sort of follow on from John there, because I think there's also going to, I mentioned this sort of interim period. I think we've also got to be conscious of, the pandemic won't be gone on in June. It will still be going on. That need to be flexible, because we may, let's hope not, but we may have to go into lockdowns, may come back. So that ability to quickly reverse where we are is going to be quite important. Go back into that sort of hibernation phase. But equally, there's going to be, during that interim period when we're trying to work out what we need, there's also going to be that sort of division as well with the person as to their approach to COVID and what they want to feel comfortable. And in my mind, we'll have people who are still very concerned about COVID and want exactly the same level of protection being demonstrated to them now. And then there'll be on the other end of the spectrum those who actually don't want to feel that they're being restricted in any way because the guidance has gone and the government said it's all over. So there's going to be an interesting period as well, where as facilities managers, we've got to be able to support the wellness of everyone within that environment, so everybody feels comfortable. And I don't think you can just say, no, there will just be one thing. We're going to have to sort of work along as we go with them on their journey as they go back into whatever normal will be in the future. So again, it's that piece of, let's not rush into this. Let's use the key bits of technology, the key sort of bits of design to optimize what we've got now, but have the flexibility for change and be responsive to that as well within sensible financial constraints.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think, just picking up on a couple of those points that, before COVID took place, we were talking to some of our large kind of, we work through resellers and integrators, and we were talking to some of the largest ones. And they were saying to us, before COVID took place, I had 5 people in my lifetime that asked me for desk booking, whereas now I have 5 people a day asking me for it. So, there are some dramatic shifts, and the reason that these shifts are taking place is to support flexibility, because I think you're absolutely right that, the first thing that things like a desk booking system can bring to an employee is an appreciation of the measures that the organization has put in place to support their safe return to work. So if you are that nervous worker and you're considering coming back, but you want to know that your employer has taken this seriously and what measures they have in place, something like a desk booking solution can help support that. But that's just the very, very tip of the iceberg, and actually that ability to have flexibility. So we're also hearing about the idea of hub and spoke approaches, where central city locations will become much more of a kind of collaboration hub, customer focused, going back to I think what Ed said earlier about some of the maybe customer facing staff within a business being almost expected to come back in and wanting to come back in to collaborate with their customers, but then giving that freedom for those who don't necessarily want to work at home. And I'm lucky that I'm sitting in a dedicated room that I can work from. David's lucky that he's got an entire stadium to work from. But there are lots of people who I have spoken to who are sat on the end of a bed, who are in their kitchen, and therefore that choice around the hub and spoke approach seems to be gaining traction from our point of view as well.
So just some of the things that we did early on, so it wasn't just the desk booking system as well, but we also had to look at things around the DDA and the impact of COVID on access. So we had to put in additional motorized doors so that we were reducing contact points, particularly we put some of our staff in wheelchairs and how we could support them, putting all the arm pulls. There was a whole plethora of things that went through very early on in order to keep the office open. So there was an initial investment, but off the back of that, I'm going to come back to the energy management piece now, because obviously it's a big topic for myself and Ed. By doing what we did, we actually reduced the energy consumption in the stadium by nearly 40%. So with it, year on year consumption by nearly 40%, which, believe me, for a stadium, that's a big wad of money. And equally, we were able to work with CBRE and our cleaning contractor to flex the staff across that period to be able to optimise maintenance against the actual usage levels of the stadium as well. So that relationship with your service provider is absolutely key as we go into this next stage of being able to continuously flex, adjust, and also modify your approach to the facility and what you're focusing on at any one time in response to its use. So yeah, we've actually shifted how we maintain the stadium. Before, it was all focused on hospitality spaces because they were the areas that were being used the most. Now we focus on key office spaces and support areas that are being used to be able to support the England rugby team whilst they're doing their tours, because that's our primary activity now. Hospitality obviously hasn't happened for a year. So it's not just how we look at the office space and the desk layout. It's all the stuff in the background as well that we should be taking that opportunity to optimise the way that we're actually maintaining our facilities, the way we're cleaning our facilities, the way we're consuming in our facilities. What's the point in maintaining something that you actually aren't going to use for 12 months? So if that room's not being in use, we'll actually then just take the maintenance of the assets within that space down to a minimum and focus your energy elsewhere. Focus it on making the spaces safe, etc. So that was one of the things that we've done and really benefited from and learned as part of the process of that flexibility. And I'm going to sort of pull John back in because I know you mentioned about things like interactive whiteboards, but and if you could just talk about that, because that's something that I think really will, particularly for a place like us where we're remotely looking at rugby, team members that could be away from the stadium. Eddie Jones is in here today, just doing his review of Six Nations, still smiling. But having that capability to be able to reach out and have that interaction. So I think, John, if you could say anything about that.
Yeah, well, so at the moment, from a sort of technology standpoint, we're seeing the initial thrust or the initial focus to be on smart workplace and hybrid working. So hybrid working is this mixture of people in an office or in a meeting room, and a percentage remaining still at home, and needing to have kind of interaction and collaboration taking place. I know Ed and I spoke previously about the fact that there's sometimes been a feeling that the people who are remote are almost second-class citizens when it comes to a live meeting taking place. It was interesting to hear your point earlier, David, about the fact that actually sometimes at the moment the people coming into work are the ones who feel like second-class citizens because there's all these other video meetings taking place whilst they're doing their stuff in a physical environment. And I have to say that until today I hadn't really thought of that. But yeah, I mean, one of the things, so we think there's a number of challenges that businesses will need to focus on. The first thing that we see is the critical one is audio, because we've all been used to working from home and being on video calls where the audio is easy to achieve with relatively cheap devices. So you're wearing a headset. I've got a little table-based microphone that costs £100 or less. Most people have been on lots of video calls and have been expecting good quality audio, and that's been achieved. And actually, it's just the broadband providers who've been sending out their adverts about bad broadband that seem to have been focusing on the quality of that home experience. But there are lots of meeting rooms that I think businesses are going to find are not adequately provisioned for audio in order to support people returning to work, people wanting to socially distance. Because if you want to socially distance, you almost automatically break the audio system by pushing your chair away from the table and by moving out of the pickup of how the system's being designed. So we've got systems that we're working with that can help with that audio challenge. And then the second challenge that will come along, either at the same time or as a result of those meetings taking place, will be whiteboarding and the challenge of you know, what happens to the people who are remote? How can they see the data that people are working on? How can they not just see it, but also contribute to it and collaborate on it? And how does that experience of a hybrid meeting actually take place, where hopefully there's a kind of connectivity to it and a joined up approach to it, which means that those who are in the room don't treat the ones who are remote as second-class citizens, and those who are remote, you know, aren't necessarily on their back channels, kind of, you know, typing chat messages to each other and, you know, all that type of stuff that they might be doing instead, which means they're having a separate meeting to the meeting that's taking place. So yeah, I mean, that whole dynamic of visualizing data and creating collaboration on that data alongside video and audio is going to be a really hot topic.
I'd agree. To chime in on that, and I can see quite a few of the questions rolling through that, as we might expect, is when do we think we might be able to do this? How do you assist with people returning to work and things, which I'm not going to profess to be able to answer all of them, because there'll be unique answers at each different site type and organization type. One question I found useful when discussing this with sort of very different client organizations at the moment is, how correct or how good do you think your real estate strategy was at supporting whatever your organizational objective was before the pandemic? Because actually, to David's point, a young workforce at the RFU, that's not a huge surprise, always likely to be a relatively young workforce at the RFU. And so they've pivoted quite easily and comfortably to more digital working. Actually, that was probably largely true before the pandemic, but the pandemic has forced forward a number of trends that were pre-existing, or a number of changes that may have been at least partially welcome anyway. And whichever organization you're in, you can probably have a bit of a think about that actually, did I have a large proportion of my workforce who would have quite liked some more flexible working anyway? In which case, that is a strong guide for they would continue to prefer that into the future, maybe even a little more so. Whereas if you had a workforce that, whatever the nature of your business, really requires that face time, post-pandemic, David's absolutely right, it won't suddenly end in June, but actually we do hope and plan for a future that isn't dictated by it. Post-pandemic, you will probably still have the same real estate requirements. It would be a mistake to try and force a change through your real estate strategy that conflicts with what was well optimized for you before. At best, I would say an organization like that probably wants to hold fire and see more of how their workforce may have changed. Whereas if you're confident that actually these changes have been a long time coming and just forced through, capitalize on them now. Because actually these change processes tend to fail, not because we don't have the technology, although that can be really key. We've had Teams and Zoom for years. We've all known about it and none of us touched it. But they tend to fail actually because of a bit of a cultural inertia. There'll be, probably some senior people who don't really want to do that. Well, that inertia is now largely gone because the whole population, in fact, most of the world, gets that some change is required. And we as key stakeholders in the organizations can use that not only to sort of optimize sites for a post-pandemic world, but maybe to achieve some changes that we'd wanted to do so beforehand, but for whatever reason hadn't quite managed to get the buy-in.
That's some superb comments there, Ed, and from David and John, obviously, as well. So yes, I think it's very notable that the pandemic has certainly been an enabler or a driver of several aspects, and we've seen this from a number of elements, both from an industry-wide perspective and also from our meetings of the BFM editorial advisory board, there's became very obvious very quickly just how many changes they'd implemented, often at very short notice, but hugely effective nonetheless. And I think our industry has actually sort of made the most really of a very difficult situation and helping a lot of people actually sort of deal with it. But as we very rightly have said, there's a lot of challenges still to come, particularly with people returning to the workplace. Many people are worrying. Many people are scared. We are the ones really that can be reassuring them, aren't we? With all the great work that's been done, both I suppose behind the scenes, perhaps with cleaning and perhaps more obvious ones with signage and one-way systems, etc. But there's still a lot more ground to cover. So we're about. Sorry, David.
Sorry, Dennis. I was going to. I know you're about to say we're sort of halfway through, but there was a couple of questions that I just wanted to answer, if that's okay.
Sure.
So we've got one question, which was: will changing conditions demand see changes in job responsibilities for FMs and their teams? So this is something that's really close to my heart, to be honest. The answer is absolutely yes. And if you're not doing it, you're probably not doing your job properly. So what's come out of this is that you have to know your facility, and you have to know it in detail, how it works, what you've got, how it operates, in order to be able to support the decision making of the exec or whoever that is running that business. Because we cost a lot of money. We spend a lot of money keeping facilities open, but we can also save a lot of money as well through knowledge. So that change in job responsibilities, I think it's always that talk when you're doing FM courses about the integration of facilities management into the decision-making team. It hasn't happened in the past, but this is the opportunity where we really should be bringing ourselves to the front and saying, we can help you improve your business, and really be able to mean it, because they've seen how we've had to respond to COVID and how we've had to make the workplace safe. So we've proven ourselves with that. Now we have to take it one step further, and we have to say, and I also know that if we do this, we can make this space better, or I can actually give you a better opportunity to be able to do something over here, or I can save you money if you start to operate in this way. So I think it's not will we see changes? I think it is for us as an industry to drive those changes. And I think if we fail to do it now, then we've got no one to blame but ourselves having missed the opportunity. So that, a bit of a one with that one, but and there was one other question, if I can. For hybrid workers, apart from facilities, who else is involved in determining what is required? So coming back to the program that we're currently working on here, the phase 3, which is obviously coming back into the workspace, is 2 people. It's the worker and it's the manager or leader of their team. So there is always going to be a business requirement that needs to be fulfilled, and it may need to be fulfilled in a particular way which that manager will require of the team. Now, I'm hoping that if they're a good manager, they'll take on board commentary and response from their team members. But equally, it's for the team members to be able to step forward and say, I can actually work better this way, or I can provide a better service to you as my manager through this manner. I know that's an easy thing to say. It's not easy for everyone to do. Everyone is different how they manage, and everyone is different at how they manage. So, but I think those are the 2 people who are ultimately in charge of that. The exec or whatever at the top, they will try to mould a policy, but ultimately it's that relationship between the direct manager and employee that will drive what you're going to do going forward. And again, it's up to the individuals to be able to try and drive that as much as it is for the managers to listen and respond as well. So I just picked up on those 2, Dennis.
That's great. No, that's perfect, David. Because I was about to say, let's go into the Q&A session, because it's we've got about 15 minutes left for the hour, which is flown by already. So many thanks for getting that one started. So the first.
Can I just add something to that, Dennis?
Go on then.
So just to pick up on a couple of those questions, or add to those questions, the other thing I would just add, and the reason for saying that we're here today, for example, is we're a technology provider. We spent most of our time dealing with IT and AV people, people who are responsible for technology in meeting rooms, for example. And we're here today trying to engage with facilities members, because we're realizing that there is this merge of the technology requirement and the technology conversation coming into the world of facilities. And just picking up on what David said there about the manager being responsible. So the other thing that we're also hearing in what some organizations are calling kind of return to work committees is HR, because HR will ultimately help those managers to make, we hope, good decisions with their employees. There's a well-being angle that needs to be considered, and there's a supporting, mentoring aspect to all of this from the employee's perspective. So, the organizations that get this right, I think, are the ones, from what we're seeing, that have a fairly holistic approach to it. There was an article that was produced by CBRE where, one of the, I think there were 10 future predictions. I can't remember what it was called now. Let me find the title.
I'll help you with that shameless plug. Thank you, Charles.
Well, I'm also mentioning it because I think it's a really good article that highlights some of these challenges. But yeah, go ahead, Ed.
So yeah, because I saw someone in the questions asking where there's more information. So yeah, if you go, to be honest, the quickest thing to do is probably if you Google CBRE, the Future Workplace Top 10 Predictions, it will take you to quite a good summary article that I've had some clients tell me, actually, if you just pop that down as a bit of a meeting agenda or something at these, it will probably get you to cover the key topics that you need to. If you need an introduction for something, that meeting between facilities, the executive, HR, all of the different components that have to bring together. But yeah, it exactly as you say. And David, in fact, even the final point is highlighting that there are probably some new jobs out there from this. This will not be a small task. If you look after a few thousand people in the city, there will be some full-time roles in ensuring that they come back in the most comfortable and productive manner.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it references Chief Places Officer, which is a great job title. But yeah, I mean, I just think that there's going to be this blend of these different cross departments that need to consider all of this from these different aspects. And then just one other quote that I wanted to just quickly mention, which is from a guy called Klaus Schwab. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who's the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. And I particularly like this quote that he came out with last year, which was that the pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. I think that's quite an interesting kind of just single sentence to consider and say, if we embrace this, and going back to Dave, the points to be made here about, who wants to come back in, who actually likes working from home, and how do we try to embrace some of those trends that Ed mentioned earlier that probably already existed within your business. There is an opportunity to really fundamentally reimagine what all of this may look like on a long-term basis. But it does require the data to be collected on an ongoing basis in order to try and make good quality decisions. And just the final analogy that I would give with this is, and I use this one quite a lot at the moment to try and explain it, is people in marketing love data. So if you're running a website, if you're doing social media, you will look at how many likes you get, how many people view articles. And my point here is that if you can treat your office like that and say, let's track as much data as possible, like we do on a website, then you will collect data which will help you to make these decisions in the future, just like marketeers do it in relation to what content is getting people to engage.
I think that's the engagement angle is something that everybody is trying to accentuate or jump on in many ways, aren't they, at the minute? And no doubt that will continue in the future, hopefully. But Ed, I mean, I'm sure you've got some more points to add to the engagement angle, or the other aspects that John was touching on there as well.
No, absolutely. I suppose facilities and cleaning and probably HVAC, ventilation in particular, has been thrust into the spotlight in a way we're not really used to over the last year. And picking up on John's sort of comparison with marketing, I would completely agree that actually for one of the first times ever, or certainly more so than ever, communicating what we're doing is arguably as important as what we're actually doing. Like if we manage to turn over fresh air into the building twice as quickly as usual, that is obviously useful compared to in terms of limiting the spread of a potential infection or anything like that. But it's probably only half the benefit realized. The other half will be realized by putting up some signage or on screens or whatever it might be, letting people know that we have done that and increasing that sense of comfort of being in the office. I do think as well as facilities managers, we've got to keep an eye on, there was a lot of well-meaning changes that came out at the beginning that actually we all, I think, had to look at how pragmatic they were. If in reality they were good on paper. The one that is often mentioned to me is you go into a lift and there are little footprints saying that everyone should stand facing into a corner. That probably does help control infection. I've never seen anyone actually do it, especially if you walk into an elevator with a group of 2 or 3 people. No, you've been talking to each other, you don't all immediately stand and face a corner. But it does, at least remind people to bear these things in mind, hopefully to continue wearing their masks. Similarly, we might only put half building occupancy in to try and maintain that social distancing. But if left completely to their own devices, 5 people will approach a bank of 10 desks and sit next to each other, or more likely sit in the desk that they always sat in for the last 5 years, because we are creatures of habit. And just finding ways of, whether it's through signage or whether it's physically taking some of them away, these are the things that actually I think we just need to make sure that we're doing the changes that it not only look good on paper, but actually help make people feel and be safer. And the last one, I think, is just we've become, facilities has often been an industry of sort of being a bit of a jack of all trades. But over the last year, I've been asked, what I know about lateral flow testing and sort of, spread of aerosolized contaminants and things like that. We can't all suddenly become expert epidemiologists or anything, but there is an expectation that we can help on these topics, and where we can provide that sort of advice to our clients. It's helping us be that trusted advisor. Chief Places Officer is a nice idea. I think facilities for a long time has felt it deserves a seat in the C-suite, but possibly not always been able to justify it. Well, realistically now, it's going to be the value that we add that decides whether the current additional focus remains as a value add, or actually we go back to just being the department that, if performing well, seamlessly enables everything else, but isn't really at the top table. Now's a bit of an opportunity for us as an industry as much as anything else.
Yeah, that's great points, Ed. David, I think you've got some points on attrition to add.
Yeah, just a very quick one. I'm conscious of time and I don't want to pick up. So there's a question there about how should FMs and clients manage possible levels of attrition emerging in the next few months. Very quickly, one is knowledge and information. So if you can truthfully explain why something cannot or can be done, the majority of the time people will understand that and then they'll respond accordingly to it. So when somebody wants to put 40 people into a room when actually only 20 is safe because of the ventilation or the social distancing, if you can explain that properly, people will respond to that, and you can actually diffuse a loss with knowledge. So it's about knowing your facility, knowing what's possible. And then the other one is, you mentioned about HR, it's having a close relationship with HR and with the other managers to be able to pick up on attrition very quickly and then deal with it as a group. We cannot be in a game of, well, it's not my problem, or just trying to pass it on to somebody else. We have to deal with attrition collectively and respond to it immediately as well. If we let things fester now, it will rapidly go out of hand. So 2 things: information, and then work collectively to be able to try and deal with attrition. So John, over to you.
So John, yes, we just got a question come in as you pointed out. So if I can share the question with everybody, then and if you can answer that. And we're into the last 5 minutes now, so this may be the last question we get. So perhaps after John has answered, then there'll be time for David and Ed to add their thoughts. So the question is, where can we go to learn more about what solutions are specifically right for us?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we'd love for you to talk to us about some of this stuff, but actually, before I mentioned that we picked up on some of these trends before the pandemic. So in 2019, we went into partnership with a furniture company in Farringdon. So there's a showroom in Farringdon where it's a partnership between a furniture company, a glass partitioning company, a carpet company, a PR agency, us as a technology provider. And we've essentially created an 8,500 square foot showroom with a mixture of open plan collaboration spaces, meeting room examples, and that's a live environment that people can visit, where we can kind of talk through all these different trends and showcase all of these different things. And the actual showroom, the furniture company have their own staff going back in. So as a result of COVID, we already had an area where we had desk booking that we'd set up for demonstration purposes. We've actually now implemented desk booking for the desks that their staff will be using. So we'll be collecting kind of real data from that showroom environment. So if you would like to learn more, I would encourage you to come there. The actual venue is called Workplace House, and it's in Farringdon. Yeah, we'd obviously be delighted to see people there, and socially distanced, obviously, but make sure that we can tell people a bit more about what some of this stuff does and how it can help people. And I just wanted to make one final point from my side, because I asked David and Ed about this before we started, which was just to encourage people to research the latest budget announcement that Mr. Sunak made in relation to the super tax deduction, because our understanding of it is that it will enable businesses who might be considering technology investments to have up to 19% of that investment paid for in tax credits by the government. So it's all linked to this 130% deduction, but there's it's a more complicated calculation where I've come to that 19%. But you can consider that it's about 19% of your actual investment that we believe you can get back from the government as tax credits. So it's another way that the government are trying to encourage stimulus for businesses who are looking to make some of these investments.
That's sorry, just as you were speaking there, John, it sounded a bit like the R&D sort of type of initiative that's been going around for a while. Just thought about that. Is there any elements there that match with that, or am I completely?
I think it's a brand new initiative, but you are right that they've also there's a number of different ones. I mean, as a business, we've actually taken advantage of some of the apprenticeships that they've been running recently as well. So. Yeah. There's a number of different initiatives. I think this is a brand new one. It's linked to corporation tax, and it's a total of 130% deduction, if you like, from your corporation tax bill.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So I've just seen the time, guys. I think that this is it. We've got to the hour already, incredibly quickly. But I'd just like to say a big thank you to John and Ascente for sponsoring the events, but also to Ed and David. Congratulations again on your superb win of the PFM Partnership Awards. Hope you're continuing to celebrate that, and we'll do so for some time to come.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Great to see everybody. Thank you very much for all the questions posted. I'm sorry we didn't get around to all of them, but I think we answered several of those in the list. But please feel free to email any questions you didn't get answered. Please pop them on an email to me, dennis.flower@imlgroup.co.uk, and I'll be happy to share them with with our panel members, or try to get our editorial advisory board to get involved to answer those questions. So thank you again to everybody. Thank you all to all our attendees, and good luck with all the reopening of facilities. Good afternoon, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.